Alright, yo, it is Mr. V making his first Algebra 2 video since he made all those weird Algebra 1 videos a long time ago. And I'm going to go through some factoring tips and tricks for you. Some little things that you might miss when it comes to the test that'll make your life easier. This is like factoring 2.0 to make sure you got all of them. So the first example I want to look at is negative 2x squared plus 3x minus 5 is equal to negative 7. Alright, right off the bat, I notice something interesting about what I am looking at. I see that I am not in standard form. Standard form for me to be able to solve these bad boys is I want it equal to 0. Always I want it to set equal to 0 so I can factor and solve. So I'm going to add 7, and when I do that, I have negative 2x squared plus 3x. If I add 7, I'm going to have a positive 2 is equal to 0. Now here's the other weird thing that I see that we haven't encountered yet, or haven't encountered it much. I see that my a term is negative. And when my a term is negative, Mr. Veenstra gets sad. Little tears. So, to get rid of that negative, I'm going to pull out a negative 1. I'm going to factor out a negative 1 to start with. So that negative 1 will then make my equation become negative 1 on the outside, a positive 2x squared, a negative 3x, and a negative 2 is equal to 0. Now I'm a little bit more happy, and I can go through and solve. Remember my factoring steps. First I take my a times my c. It's going to be my new a value, 2, times my new c value, negative 2. So it'll get me negative 4. And I want the factors of negative 4, the two things that multiply to give negative 4, but add to equal negative 3. Well, if I think about it, I have a negative 4 and a positive 1. Because negative 4 times 1 gets negative 4, yet negative 4 plus 1 is negative 3. So I can group and factor. The first term stays the same, 2x squared. The second term, the b value, splits into my two factors that I found over here. So negative 4x, don't forget the x, plus 1x, minus 2. From here I can group it. I can group here, here, and here. And now I'm just looking for more GCFs. What is the GCF of the first group? Well, that is going to be a 2x and a 2x. So, excuse me, I burped up some ramen noodles. That 2x is going to go up front. 2x squared divided by 2x, I get just a lonely x. And then negative 4x divided by 2x, I get negative 2. Then I have to do the same process on the other problem. Biggest GCF here, well, there really isn't anything. So I'm going to just divide through by 1. Remember, if there's nothing there that I can divide by, I'm just going to divide by 1. So that's going to be plus 1, and I have x minus 2. And again, there's a built-in check through this. If you got these two the same thing, happy Mr. Veenstra. Yay! So my two factors are 2x plus 1 and x minus 2. Now don't forget this negative 1 that was up front that we pulled out at the beginning. And of course this is equal to 0. To go ahead and solve this, the first thing I would have to do is get rid of this negative 1. Well, I can divide by negative 1, divide everything by negative 1, divide by negative 1, but 0 divided by negative 1 stays a 0. So I have 2x plus 1 and x minus 2 is equal to 0. Remember that 0 times anything will get 0. So as long as one of these things is equal to 0, I am happy and I am Gucci. So I'm going to set both of them equal to 0. I have 2x plus 1. Wow, my stomach is grumbling. Is equal to 0, and x minus 2 is equal to 0. I can solve. It's totally okay if you get a negative answer or a decimal. So I'm going to subtract 1, subtract 1. 2x is equal to negative 1. Divide by 2, x is equal to negative 1/2. If you typed it in the calculator, you would have gotten negative 0.5. And I go over here, I add 2, I get x is equal to 2. So my two solutions are x is equal to 1/2 and x is equal to 2. Alrighty. So the only weird thing on that problem was the fact that it was not in standard form and I had a negative a value that I wanted to get rid of. Let's see if we can find any more tricks. Here's my next one I want to go over. Draw a line, separate what we're doing. Let's look at this one. This one has a couple weird things going on. Let's go 8x squared is equal to 128. This one looks stupid. It looks weird. Well, first off, I know I'm not in standard form because I'm not equal to 0. So let's get it into standard form. I'm going to subtract 128. 128. So I am left with 8x squared minus 128 is equal to 0. Now I also see I have a GCF. I can factor out that GCF. 8 and 128 are divisible by 8. So if I pull that 8 out, I'm going to divide by 8. Divide by 8. So I have an 8 on the outside. 8 divided by 8 is x squared. 128, I'm getting into big numbers, divided by 8 is going to be minus 16 is equal to 0. Now, there are two ways that you can tackle this problem. The first way relies on a trick that you learned in Algebra 1. I noticed that I have a perfect square right here, a perfect square right here, and they are subtracted. I'm thinking back to my days of difference of two squares, and I know that this will factor into x plus 4 and x minus 4. Because x times x gets x squared, 4 times negative 4 gets a negative 16, and the x terms will cancel. If you can't remember that, here's how you would go through solving by grouping. I do the same stuff. A times c, well, my a is going to be 1. My c is negative 16. So 1 times negative 16, I get negative 16. And here's the weird part. Remember, I always want them to add to equal my b. Well, what is my b in this problem? I don't see anything over here. If there's nothing there, the only thing my b could be, baby, is equal to 0. So I want the two factors of negative 16 that add to equal 0. Well, if I go through, I know I have a negative 4 and a positive 4. Because those two things multiply to give negative 16, yet add to equal 0. So I can group my stiff. I have x squared minus 4x plus 4x minus 16. I can group the first terms and the second terms. Divide through by GCF. This one only has an x to pull out, so I have x, and I have x minus 4. This one I can only pull out a 4, so it's going to be a positive 4 and x minus 4 again. I know I'm doing it right because my x minus 4s match up. Again, happy Mr. Veenstra. So my two factors are x plus 4 and x minus 4. We got the 8 up front. It's all equal to 0. Remember my last step, the new part is I'm solving by factoring. This is where I'm setting equals 0, where I'm finding where it crosses the x-axis, root solutions and zeros. So I have the 8 goes away because I divide by 8, divide by 8. Those cancel. 0 divided by 8 is still 0. And then I have x plus 4 is equal to 0, and x minus 4 is equal to 0. Subtract over, I get x is equal to negative 4, and x is equal to positive 4. These are my solutions. Real quick, it's important to remember why we're doing this and what we're doing. This right here is a parabola. It's a parabola opening up like this. That's a crude sketch, but it's what the parabola looks like. And remember, I just found two roots where it's equal to 0. This one is at x equals 4, and x equals to negative 4. It's where the parabola, this part right here, crosses y equals 0. Just a reminder that we have solved these using graphs and tables, but now we are solving it algebraically. Alright, the good thing about these videos, if you have gotten lost, imagine that YouTube has this thing where you can rewind and pause and do all this crazy stuff. Who would have thunk that you could have done that? Amazing. So if you got lost, go back, review what we just did. Here's another one. I'm going to throw some weird things at you. More weird things, because Mr. Veenstra is weird. Please help. I'm not okay. 6x squared minus 7x. And I am going to ask you this question. For what values of x would f of x be equal to 3? For what values of x would f of x be equal to 3? Well, remember, f of x is equals to is the same thing as saying y is equal to 3. And I have an equation that says, well, f of x is equal to this stuff. So let's plug in my 3 into this. So I get 3x squared minus 7x, boom, boom. And I want to find out what the x values are when this is true. Well, I see something that sort of looks like it could be factorable, but it's not in standard form. It's in some other form. So let's get rid of that 3. Let's move that 3 over, move the 3 over to here. So I have 0 is equal to 6x squared minus 7x minus 3. And I know what you're thinking, because sometimes I'm smart. Not all the time. Actually, not most of the times. You're thinking, wait, Mr. Veenstra, this 0 is on the left-hand side. Does that matter? Nope. It's still equal to 0. I still got my x squared, my x, and my number still in standard form. Is there any GCF that I can factor out? Well, 6, 7, and 3, the biggest number that divides into all three of those? No, there's nothing there. So I just go on with my factoring steps. A times C, 6 times negative 3. Wow, that rhymed. Just call me Migos, dog. Negative 18. Now I have to think of the factors of negative 18 that add to equal negative 7. If you have not seen this trick before, here's where I'm going to show you. You can always go to your calculator, go to your y equals. Let me see if I can get rid of that glare. Everything's dark now. Hopefully you can still see it. I have my negative 18. I can do negative 18 divided by x, whatever my number is, divided by x. And I can go to my table. My table now tells me all the things that multiply to give negative 18. All I have to do is figure out which pair adds up to equal negative 7. So again, I went to y equals. I typed in whatever I got right here, divided it by x, and went to my table. And I see, boom, 2, negative 9, because 2 plus negative 9 gets me negative 7. So going back to what I was working on, turn back on the light. 2, and negative 9. So I can now factor this, or group it. 6x squared plus 2x minus 9x minus 3. I'm going to group the first terms and the last terms. I look at this. I see I can divide out a 2 and an x. So I have 2x on the outside. 6x squared divided by 2x is going to be 3x. 2x divided by 2x will be plus 1. Over here, this is the first time we've encountered this in our review, our little tips and tricks. This is a negative. So I want to divide by a negative. I know I'm going to divide by negative something because this term right there is negative. Negative 9 and negative 3, well, I can divide by a negative 3. So I have a minus 3 out here. Negative 9x divided by negative 3, I get a positive 3x. And negative 3 divided by negative 3, I get 1. And I am happy because I see same terms side to side. So I have 2x minus 3 and 3x plus 1. Remember, this is equal to 0. And I, again, am trying to find what values of x where y was equal to 3. So far, I've gotten down to this. All I need to find out are what my x values are. So 2x minus 3 is equal to 0. And 3x plus 1 is equal to 0. So I can move the 3 over, plus 3, plus 3. 2x is equal to 3, so divide by 2, divide by 2. X is equal to 3 over 2. I can do the same thing for the other one. Minus 1, minus 1. 3x is equal to negative 1. Divide by 3. Divide by 3. X is equal to negative 1/3. And again, these will get you decimals. That's okay. Just make sure you're reading. If I want you to round to the hundredths, the thousandths, or the tenths, it's important that you read and see what's going on. Because honestly, 99.9% of your problems is you just don't read. You goons. Come on now. Alright, a couple more. Here's a more advanced one. And if you are not a K student, you can still look at it and you can see it. But this is mainly for my K students. This is mainly for my upper levels, for those that want to push. If you're an L, you can go ahead and skip this problem. If you are a K, I need you to see this problem because this honestly happens a lot in calculus and in pre-cal and as you go through. What if I gave you something like this? Negative, parentheses, x plus y squared minus 6x plus y plus 8 is equal to 0. And I say I want you to solve by factoring. Oh boy. Yikes. That looks honestly disgusting. That looks super gross. It doesn't even look like I have a trinomial that I could factor. But honestly, there is one. It's just hidden. Right now, I have something squared, then that same something, and then a constant at the end. What if I did this? What if I replaced every x plus y with something else? Let's say that x plus y, we're going to redefine it as t. I have no idea. I'm just trying to make it simpler and easier to see. So everywhere I see an x plus y, I'm going to replace it with a t. Because I'm thinking, something squared, something, and then a constant. It sort of looks like a trinomial, but not really. So I have negative 2. X plus y is now a t squared minus 6. But instead of x plus y, I'm going to put a t. Plus 8. Oh, wow, would you look at that? I now have a trinomial that I can factor. Let's go through and let's do it. Let's do it, baby. I say that I have a negative, and there's a GCF through here. So let's divide everything by negative 2. Negative 2, negative 2. So I'm going to have this negative 2 up front. That leaves me with t squared plus 3t minus 4 is equal to 0. Now, you go ahead and pause the video. Pause the video and see if you can factor this, because I'm about to just write the factors, because Mr. Veenstra is a math whiz. Pause it. Try it. Welcome back if you actually paused. If you didn't, because you're being a lazy goon. So sad. I know that this is going to factor into t plus 4 and t minus 1 is equal to 0. So in my last step, I can solve this. Remember, I can divide out by this negative 2. Those never affect my coefficients. My GCFs that I pull up never affect my answer. So I have t plus 4 is equal to 0, and t minus 1 is equal to 0. If I wanted to solve this, remember I could subtract 4, so I would get t is equal to negative 4, and t is equal to 1. So, technically, I have solved this by factoring. But, remember way at the beginning, I said t was what? I said t was x plus y. So, I have one level deeper, and trust me, this is the hardest that you'll ever see this type of problem. I have x plus y, which was t, is equal to negative 4, because right down here, I said t is equal to negative 4. Well, what was t? T was x plus y. So t, x plus y, is equal to negative 4. I also have t is equal to 1. So I have x plus y is equal to 1. So yes, I solved for t. I factored it. But I have yet to find what x and y are. I now have a system of equations. A system of equations that you can solve whatever method you want. I'll go through real quickly and I'll do elimination. I know if I multiply this top by negative 1, I'm going to cancel some stuff out. So that's going to come down here. My new equation will be negative x minus y will be a positive 4. X and y cancel. Y and y cancel. I'm left with 0 is equal to 5. Now this should tell you something. Yes, it's weird, but is this a true statement? Heck no, 0 is not equal to 5. So, there is no solution. Now don't get confused. The factoring step I did, and I found out that my two roots of whatever this thing is lie at negative 4 and positive 1. But if I were to go through and actually solve for x and y, there's no place where this actually happens. And that's where I put my no solution as I'm going through here. That process is the same. What if I replaced these guys with like a sine theta? I wonder why I'm saying that. Maybe it's a problem on your homework. I would do the same thing, replace it with a sine theta, and at the end I could write, hey, sine theta, theta is this little thing right there, is equal to negative 4, and sine of theta is equal to 1. Now these equations you have no earthly idea how to solve yet. You gotta wait till pre-cal. You'll get there, but we don't know yet. So all you have to do is set them up. We're just gearing you ready, getting you ready for when you see those things. Because trust me, once you get to this step, and then you come back to me in calculus, you're going to get something like this, where I have you find the integral of these guys. And you're going to tell me, well, the integral of this is going to be negative cosine of theta plus c is equal to theta. And then I'm going to have you solve for c. Now, you don't have to worry about that until 2 years. And that's when you get back to Mr. Veenstra. And he's going to be old by then. Meh, I'm old. Meh, meh. That's old, Mr. Veenstra. Let me give me a cane. Old Mr. Veenstra. Meh. Do calculus. Alright, that's enough of being weird. I got one more problem I want to do with you. One more, and I ran out of paper, so I need to grab another paper. Everyone look around or pause the video or be crazy. Actually, don't be crazy. Be a little crazy, but not a lot crazy. Because everyone's crazy in their own way. Alright, last one I want to do with you. Last one I want to do. Let's set up a word problem. Because those are important. My buddy Jason is standing on a cliff. Hello, Jason. Here is water. And Jason is going to jump off the cliff for some reason into the water. Jason's height, his distance from the water, is given by this equation, negative 16t squared plus 16t plus 480. And I want to find the time in seconds, in seconds, when Jason hits the ground and probably has a concussion. I want to find out when Jason is going to reach the water. Well, I know Jason is going to reach the water when his height is equal to 0. Right now he's real high up on the cliff, and he's going to jump, and he's going to belly flop, and there's Jason belly flopping. I want to know when his height is going to be equal to 0. So I take my equation and I set it equal to 0. T plus 480. Alright, well this looks like something I can factor and solve for. I first see that all of these numbers, even 480, is divisible by 16. I also see I got a negative. Ooh, gross. So divide by negative 16. Negative 16, negative 16. So I have negative 16 t squared minus t. Go to calculator for the last one because those are big numbers. 480 divided by negative 16. I'm going to get negative 30. Boom. Let's go through and factor this. Here's another one where I want you to pause the video. Pause. Pause the video to see what you're going to get. Pause it, because I'm just going to write down the factors. We've had a lot of practice on this. Hopefully we're getting faster and faster and faster. Welcome back. I have t minus 6 and t plus 5 is equal to 0. So, if I want to solve for this, I'm going to get t is equal to 6 and t is equal to negative 5. That's me setting each one equal to 0. I'm going to have t minus 6 equal to 0. I add 6 to get positive 6. I have t plus 5 is equal to 0. I subtract 5 to get negative 5. And if you were to stop and say, well, Jason hits at these times, you would absolutely be incorrect. Because what am I solving for? I'm solving for time. This is not a science fiction movie. We cannot have Jason going backwards 5 seconds. Negative? No way. It is a negative answer. It can't have negative time. So the time where Jason hits the ground and gets a concussion is after 6 seconds. Boom. That's all she wrote, ladies and gentlemen. If you have questions, rewatch the video. Mr. V is out. Peace.